Hi, it's Liz from Fast Kitty Crafts. You are just going to love this easy top-down raglan cardigan with a dreamy puff stitch border and generous poet sleeves. I will walk you through 6 different sizes, and those measurements on the right are the circumference around the sweater. You should pick the size that gives you about 3 to 5 inches of ease. I will be making the small, and on me it's an extra 5 inches around my bust measurement. For my size small sweater, I used 4 balls of this size 4 weight yarn, which comes to 928 yards. You will need a size K or 6.5 millimeter crochet hook, and the gauge is 11 stitches by 8 rows equals 4 inches. First, we will start with a slip knot and chain 32 for sizes extra small through medium, and chain 38 for sizes large through 2X. When you reach the end of the chain, turn the chain over, and in the second chain from the hook, place a half double crochet and half double crochet to the end of the chain. And so for row 2, we will turn without a turning chain, and in the first stitch, we will create a chainless double crochet, which will take the place of a regular double crochet. So start with a single crochet and then turn your stitch to the side, and in those 2 side loops create another single crochet. And also in the same stitch we will make a V-stitch, which is another double crochet, chain 2, and double crochet all in the same stitch. And now double crochet in the next 6 stitches, and we will V-stitch in the next stitch. And now here's that V-stitch in the next stitch, which again is a double crochet, chain 2, double crochet in the same stitch. And now double crochet in the next 15 stitches for size extra small through medium, and 21 stitches for sizes large through 2X. And now once you've finished your 15 or 21 double crochets, you will V-stitch again in the next stitch. After the V-stitch, you will double crochet in the next 6 stitches. And you should now be at the last stitch, and you will V-stitch and double crochet all in the last stitch. And from now on, it's pretty easy, not too much more counting. So for row 3, chain 1, turn, and place 2 half double crochets in the first stitch. And now half double crochet in the next stitch, and then we will do a V-stitch in that chain 2 space, which is a half double crochet, chain 2, half double crochet, all in the same chain space. And now just repeat this process around the yoke. So it's a half double crochet in each stitch, and then in each chain 2 space we will do a V-stitch, which is a half double crochet, chain 2, half double crochet. We will end this row with a V-stitch in that last chain 2 space, half double crochet in the next stitch, and then 2 half double crochets in the last stitch. And so now for row 4, turn without a turning chain and chainless double crochet in the first stitch and then double crochet again in the same stitch. Now the rest of the row is easy, just double crochet in each stitch, V-stitch in each chain 2 space, and end the row with 2 double crochets in the last stitch. So now here I am at the end of the row, and I'm placing my 2 double crochets in the last stitch, and then chain 1, turn, so now just repeat this process, alternating your half double crochet and double crochet rows, and begin with 2 stitches in the first stitch and a V-stitch in each chain space. And then eventually you will get to the point where your front increases meet in the middle at my row 11. That was my last row of front increases. Depending on the size you're making, that row number may be different. And so then for the following rows, discontinue those front increases and just place 1 stitch in the first stitch and 1 stitch in the last stitch. And then just keep going like this until we reach the end of the yoke. And so now here I am at the end of my yoke. For me, for my size small, the last row was row 19. And so as a suggestion, I've listed the other sizes, what your row number should be. And when you reach your last row, just measure across the body, and that number will be half of your circumference measurement. And so the last row of your yoke will either be a half double crochet row or a double crochet row. It doesn't really matter. Just continue on and place 1 stitch in each stitch until you get to the next chain 2 space. And remember, we're still alternating half double crochet rows and double crochet rows. And so when you get to the first chain 2 space, place 1 stitch into the chain 2 space, and then skip over the next section, which will become the sleeve, and then place another stitch into the next chain 2 space. And then repeat by placing 1 stitch in each stitch until you get to the next chain 2 space. And so again, just place 1 stitch into the chain 2 space, skip over the sleeve section and place another stitch into the next chain 2 space, and then place 1 stitch in each stitch to the end of the row. And now just keep alternating your half double crochet rows and double crochet rows down the length of your body. You can decide how long you'd like this section. Mine turned out to be about 5 inches. Oh, and your last row should be a half double crochet row. And our next row will be a puff stitch row. So begin with a chain 1, turn, and we will begin with a puff stitch in the first stitch, so yarn over, insert your hook into the stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over again, insert your hook into the stitch again, pull through a loop, yarn over again, insert your hook into the stitch, pull through a loop, and then pull through all the loops on your hook. And then chain one, skip the next stitch, and then puff stitch in the next stitch. And repeat across the row, ending with a puff stitch in the last stitch. And so this should work perfectly if you have an odd number of stitches, but if you don't, depending on your size, just skip 2 stitches there, sort of at the side area. It won't really show, and then that way you'll end with a puff stitch in the last stitch. And so then chain 1, turn, and we will half double crochet in the first stitch. And this is what it looks like. It's the V that's just to the left of the puff stitch. And then we're going to half double crochet into the chain from the row before. And then half double crochet into the next stitch, and then into the next chain, and repeat across the row. And here I am about to put my last half double crochet into that puff stitch, and this is what it looks like. It's those 2 side loops on the side of the puff stitch. And so now I've also went ahead and repeated these last 2 rows, and just keep repeating until you get to the length you'd like your cardigan to be. And so now we will start working on the sleeve. And if your next row is a double crochet row, it will be on the right side, and if it's a half double crochet, we will start on the wrong side and then go to that first stitch just beyond the chain 2 space at the underarm, join your yarn, and if you're at a double crochet row like I am, I chain 1 and then I'll do a stacked single crochet just like the chainless double crochets we've been doing, and then stitch in each stitch around the armhole. And now here I am at the end of the armhole row, and I'm placing my last stitch into that last stitch before the chain 2. And then just join to your first stitch. And then chain 1, turn, and then skip your turning chain and the joining stitch, and then half double crochet into the first stitch, and continue with your half double crochets across the row. And now here I am at the end of the half double crochet row, and that last stitch goes into the same stitch as your join. And then join to your first stitch, chain 1 and turn. And then skip your turning chain and the joining stitch, and then do your stacked single crochets in that next stitch. And then double crochet across the row. And here's what the end of the double crochet row looks like. Your last stitch will be in the same stitch as your join. In other words, it's that same stitch where your turning chain comes out of. And then just repeat these last 2 rows one more time, ending with a double crochet row. And then you'll see there's that gap at the underarm, but you can just stitch that up with the tail later. So you can customize the length of your sleeve at this section. You can add another row or 2. Just make sure you end at a double crochet row. Next you'll need 8 stitch markers and place the first one at the first stitch. And make sure that marker is centered there on the sleeve, and then just go directly to the back of the sleeve and place another stitch marker, and then place one at each side, and then place 4 more at the centers of those stitch markers. And it doesn't have to be a perfect count in between each marker, it won't really show. And so for the next row, chain 1, turn, and then half double crochet in each stitch until you get to the next stitch marker, and then at each marker we will place 2 half double crochets. And now just repeat your 2 stitch increases at each stitch marker until you get to the end of the row. And join to your first stitch, chain 1, and turn. And now skip your chain and joining stitch and puff stitch into the first stitch. Chain 1, skip the next stitch and puff stitch into the next stitch. And repeat across the row, and I'll meet you at the end of the row. And so now your last puff stitch should be in that last stitch just before the joining stitch, and then chain 1 and join to your first puff stitch. And so when you're joining, it's that V just to the right of the puff stitch, and then chain 1 and turn. And so now skip the turning chain and the joining stitch, and our first half double crochet will be going into that chain 1 from the previous row, and continue with our half double crochets in each stitch and in each chain across the row. And now just repeat these 2 rows for as long as you'd like your sleeve, ending with a puff stitch row. And so now for our last row, we will chain 1, turn, and we will be decreasing for our cuff. So we will begin by doing a half double crochet 2 together over the first 2 stitches. So skip your joining stitch, yarn over, insert your hook into the first stitch, yarn over, pull through a loop, yarn over again, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through a loop, yarn over again, and pull through all the loops on your hook. And we will repeat the half double crochet 2 together over the next 2 stitches and repeat around the cuff. And then join to the first stitch, chain 1 and turn. And now I wanted my cuff a little bit tighter, so I switched to a smaller eye hook. And then I skipped the joining stitch and slip stitched in each stitch around the row. And then join to your first slip stitch and then finish off. And then repeat these sleeve instructions for the other sleeve. Now we're at the bottom of the body of the cardigan, and after the sleeves were done I tried it on and I decided to add a couple extra rows. So now I'm switching to a smaller hook, a size J hook. Chain 1 and then single crochet into the first stitch. And then we're going to front post half double crochet around the next stitch. So just insert your hook from the front, go around the back of the post, and complete your half double crochet as normal. And the next stitch will be around the back post. So insert your hook from the back, go around the front of the post, and complete your half double crochet stitch. And repeat these 2 stitches across the bottom of the cardigan, ending with a single crochet in the last stitch. And here is my last single crochet in the last stitch, and then I chain 1, turn, and then I will evenly single crochet along the front edge. And if you want your neck edge a little tighter, you can switch to a smaller hook and slip stitch across the neck edge, and then continue your single crochets down the other front edge. And now your beautiful cardigan is all done. Now that wasn't too hard, was it?